180.
Welcome back to Online Darts, everyone. We are here in Belfast for the opening weekend, or opening week of the Premier League, but we'll come on to that in a minute, Matt. First of all, it's been a busy time. It's been a while since we've sat down. Plenty going on. We have a new world champion, the youngest ever. Luke's got his hands on the trophy at last after a final last year. What was your take on the whole World Championships as a whole? Won't go into the individual bits.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love the World Championship. It's such an amazing event, isn't it? And every year it just creates new stories and sets new records. So I think it was a tale of upsets and obviously the nine darters and things like Rashid Sweeting's story and all that sort of stuff was just fantastic. So it left us with a lot of memories. Obviously Littler winning was the fairy tale that the world was looking for. I think probably my only regret, if you look back to the final, was if Michael had started a little bit more sharply, and I think he obviously regrets that himself. Then we may have had a slightly closer final, which could have been absolutely amazing. But nevertheless, you can't control live sport, so it was a great tournament and one which we're very proud of.
Now it's done and he is world champion. Do you think things will settle down a little bit now, where the narrative isn't Wonder Boy? It's like he's just a world-class dart player winning dart games.
Maybe, yeah, and especially now he's 18 as well. It's kind of almost like a phase 2 for him now as world champion and an adult. But he proved last year that he could deliver on a regular basis. He came back from that little lull he had sort of September, October time, or back when he lost from the first round of the match play onwards. So I think for Luke, it's his head's all on darts. He loves darts. He wants to play darts. He's not easily distracted by the world that's going on around him. And he'll be one of the hardest players to beat this year as well, obviously. So it's maybe taken a little bit of pressure off him being world champion. For some players, being world champion is the pressure. But for him, because everyone was saying he was going to go and win the world championship, maybe actually doing that will alleviate some of that pressure.
When we look back at the year Luke Humphries had as world champion, does it go under the radar a little bit, the way he conducted himself and carried that world championship for the year, the way he handled himself in the media, in the events and everything like that, right up there at the highest order?
I hear that narrative a lot, that Luke was under the radar and stuff, and I don't necessarily agree with it, because everybody knows who he is. His name's etched into lots and lots of trophies. I don't really know what else he was supposed to have done done to him. He didn't have the element of youth on his side in the same way that Luke Littler did, which certain aspects of normal, probably like non-darts media, maybe lifestyle media, would cotton on to.
Yeah.
But that's the same in any walk of life. If a 16-year-old is top of the charts, or a 16-year-old wins an Oscar or something like that, they're going to get those sort of headlines in a different way to how someone in their late 20s would.
Over 3.5 million watched the World Final again to back up the numbers from the year before. You must be delighted that trend has carried on with millions watching.
That was really reassuring. And it wasn't just the World Championship as well. I think something like 95% of the most watched Premier League darts nights of all time were last year. The match play was the highest match play final figures. Grand Prix, throughout the whole year, and then even into the start of this year, the figures for the Winmore World Masters we've just seen, over 750,000 on ITV4 for the latter stages, So I think the fact that the viewing figures are holding up shows that, number one, it's not just people just preoccupied with certain players. People are interested in the sport and the events. And number two, that old adage, darts is for life, not just for Christmas.
Yeah, look, and you touched on everything that's come with that. The Sky deal is now announced that Barry told the world it was pretty much done anyway, but is it not a relief, but you pleased that's now out in the open and darts has its home again for the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, look, clearly that contract is hugely important to the future of darts and the success of darts. Sky have been, it's coming up towards 4 decades of a partnership by the time this contract comes to its end, and they are the number one home for televised darts in the UK and therefore around the world. So they're a great partner of ours, one who deliver consistently excellent production across consistently excellent events, and we're very pleased to be sticking with them.
Was there ever a danger of it moving elsewhere?
Yeah, maybe, yeah. There was people out there who wanted it, but our priority was to stay with Sky. Because they were our home. We're loyal people. They're loyal to us. We're loyal to them. Works both ways. But there was certainly a lot of interest.
Now that deal is done and signed, obviously when I spoke to Barry a few weeks ago, he said we're going to get prize money increases this year. Obviously, the Pro Tour starts this coming week. Will they be announced, or will there be Pro Tour increases by the time?
So the Pro Tour increases come in the form of the 4 new events.
Right, okay.
So the 4 new events is an extra £500,000 into the Players' Championships.
Yeah.
You know, and then we're reviewing what we'll do with everything else. We'll take our time, we'll get it right. You know, we've got to make sure that the prize money increases are not just at the top end, they're at the middle and the bottom end as well. We've got to make sure that the prize money increases are spread across events and not just focused on the biggest 2 or 3 events. So we're working through that at the moment. We've got a sign-off process that we'll get towards, and then we'll announce it. But it'll be a lot more money going into players' pockets.
Obviously, Premier League, we're here for this. The announcement has split a lot of people on social media. Good,
always
bad.
does. That's all right.
Good, bad, and different. Was this arguably the hardest Premier League lineup you've had to pick?
Well, I can't remember every single one, Phil.
But certainly in the modern era, is this the hardest one you've had to pick?
Yeah, I think this is probably. Sometimes it's hard to leave players out, and sometimes it's hard to put players in. So this was difficult. I'm not sure. Again, what I always think about is there someone out there who can genuinely say, I 100% should have been in it and I wasn't? There's always people who can make a case.
Yeah.
I did this, I've done that before. I'm this ranking, whatever. There's always people who can make a case on certain grounds, but I'm not sure there's anybody who can honestly look in the mirror and say, 100% I should have been in Premier League darts this year. Now, that's not to say that of all the 8 players who are in it, they can all look at themselves and say, I 100% should have been in it either. But ultimately, someone's got to get the nod.
Yeah,
so we look at everything. We look at their performances, we look at their ranking, we look at their persona, their profile, and we have to make a decision. But the news for people who aren't in it is there's always next year, So we'll do exactly what I think probably you and I have talked about in the past with people like Rob Cross or James Wade going back a few years, or Luke Humphreys. Go out there and put yourself in a position where you're undroppable for next year.
You touched on, I completely agree that there wasn't anyone that can say 100% they did enough. Like the World Championships, I'm guessing a couple played themselves in, and vice versa, a couple played themselves out as well.
Because of the stature of the World Championship and the timing of it, the World Championship is obviously going to have a significant impact on the Premier League. More so than perhaps some events might do earlier in the year.
Off the back of that, first time I've heard players speaking out in a long time in the manner they have. We had words like scandalous, people only play because of walk-ons. When you see comments like that from players, what do you think about them?
I don't think anything. Anyone is entitled to voice their opinion, and there's been plenty of occasions where players haven't been happy with decisions that we've made. And ultimately, they can, if my phone will ring, and if someone wants to speak to me about it, I'll speak to them about it, and I'll look them in the eye and give them an honest answer. And it is what it is. I think it's good that people are disappointed because it shows they care. If the rewards weren't there and the incentives weren't there, then they wouldn't care. So, I totally understand that people won't be happy about it, certain people, but that's their prerogative and they're right.
Did any of those players message you or whatever?
I've had some conversations with players, yeah. And they're very mature. They understand, and I've had some really, decent conversations with players and their management, about why we felt they came short, and most of them were very honest about it themselves and either said I didn't expect to be in, or thanks for letting me know about what you feel I can do for next year, and our door's always open. Look, I always say to players, and I say to anybody, we want every single player to be at their best. There is no advantage to us in any player not being at their best, none whatsoever. So if there's anything we can do to help players, to work through situations with players, our door will always be open. Yeah,
and obviously changes for 2025 have again split very much opinion. Let's go straight to obviously the Euro Tour one.
Yeah.
Another change, and where the seedings have switched over. From a PDC point of view, how did this come about, and what's the reasoning behind this?
The reasoning behind it is on a number of levels. We look at our main order of merit, and we have to make sure that the rewards are there and are fairly distributed for players at different levels of that order of merit. And we feel that to be in the top 16 of the main order of merit is a goal that really should be rewarded, or an achievement that should be really rewarded. And players who are in the next bracket down need to have they should strive to get in it. And I think that this is one of those scenarios where players who are just outside are obviously going to be disappointed, you know. But in the same vein, they've got opportunities to get into that group. You know, I looked at the numbers. I did a spreadsheet about the evolution, or sorry, evolution's the wrong word. The change in players over a 2-year cycle in different sections of the rankings. You know, top 8, top 16, top 32. It's over half. You know, in a 2-year period, over half the players in each of those brackets changes. So the opportunities are there for players to move forward. And clearly, if you've got something and someone takes it away from you, you're not going to be happy about that. But we have to take the bigger picture. We have to look at scheduling. We have to look at demands on players. We have to look at rewards and incentives for players. And one thing we've always done with the European Tour, because it's still in its infancy as a tour, you know, it's still less than 10 years old really, is we've made changes, we've evaluated those changes, and then if we felt they weren't right, we've altered them again. You know, so we'll do the same with this over the next 12 months. We'll have a look at it. We'll see if it does look like it's too protectionist, or is it the right level of reward? That's the kind of question we'll ask ourselves.
Well, you touched on the protectionist there. From anyone that's not in that top 16, it could be, or it is going to be very hard for them to break into that now because of that head start the 16 now have. Can you understand the players' frustrations? Not so much in the 16 Pro Tour spots, but the ones even below that, where in comparison they've got to win, I think, 3 times as many games to match the money if the seed wins one game.
Yeah, I think there's different ways of looking at it, but obviously if you are, you know, 50th or 60th in the world, then you are by definition not in the same bracket as someone who's in that top 16 anyway. So you know, you shouldn't always expect to have the same, you know, an equal path, you know, because you have to work your way up the rankings. You know, you speak to any of the guys who are in the top 16, you know, with hardly any exceptions, they've all had to fight their way up the rankings over the years. You know, so as I say, we'll evaluate everything, and if we feel something's unfair, then we'll change it. But at the moment, we feel this is the right decision for the European Tour.
This is Premier League and European Tour related. With the rule the way it is, going forward, then is it then hard to pick someone outside the top 16 for the Premier League? Because, like you say, the travelling and the schedule, if they're here on and then they've got to get to, say, Graz or something.
Maybe,
is that then hard to pick?
But it's happened before. You know, we've had players playing on the Thursday in the Premier League and Friday in the European Tour before. You know, I mean, travel is always possible. You know, if you're not going to play in all the European Tour events, maybe you would choose some to miss that we're after different ones to get. You know, I think that's a very, very specific example that you wouldn't necessarily change a whole rule around just on a hypothetical basis. Also,
with this change, does this devalue the Players' Championship events a little bit? Because now effectively those big boys, they've only got to work out, right, I need 15 grand, I'm just using a thing to make sure I'm at mine head. If I get that in the first 2 weeks, I don't need to go to another Players' Championship event, because the top 16 on the Pro Tour they used to concentrate on it for the Euro Tour seedings. Now they don't need to. So does that devalue?
Is that not a good thing for the players at the middle or the bottom end of the rankings?
It could be seen as one, but also is it a bad thing for the product that those players aren't there?
But the product is what the product is. You know, that product is there for the players' benefit. That product is not a particularly commercially prolific product. You know, it doesn't have a crowd, doesn't have broadcasters. It's a product that is live streamed on our website and on certain betting websites for obvious reasons. But ultimately, it is a product that is there to give the players an opportunity to make a living. You know, if you're a tour card holder now, with your 34 European Tour events, your 14 qualification opportunities for the European Tour, your UK Open, your Grand Slam, your World Series Finals qualifier, your World Championship qualifier, I might have forgotten something, but the World Masters qualifier, you know, you've got, we've worked it out, you've got the equivalent of 104, you've got 104 tournaments, one a week over the 2 years of your tour card. Now, that's a lot of opportunities. You know, I don't think, you know, a tennis player or a golfer would expect to have more than that. You know, when you look at individual sports, if you're being given the opportunity on average once a week to go and earn a living, then there comes a time when you have to deliver. You know, otherwise maybe you're not ready for the status that you've got.
interesting that Barry said something similar when I sat down with him, and he said over the next 2 to 3 years he expects the tour to become younger because youngsters take more risks than, and he used.
Well, they're able to, aren't they? They maybe don't have mortgages.
He used Mickey Mantle as an example because of what Mickey said at the Grand Slam about that risk and reward, where the older player isn't willing to
listen.
risk.
If you've got a career and you're earning your wage and you've got a mortgage and you've got kids to support and this, that, and the other, then it's more of a risk. If you're 22 years old and you're still, you're able to get some help from your parents or a sponsor, or your life's cheaper generally because it is when you're younger, then of course it's going to be more. But also the way the sport's going in terms of the age profile of players who are taking it up now, it's not players evolving from pub teams to become professional like it was 20, 30 plus years ago. Yeah. This is players now who are coming through the JDC or through the development tour or through none of that. They've just learned to play by putting a dartboard on the back of their bedroom door. It's a totally different pathway to being a professional. So this is the first year. I've said this before, my favourite spreadsheet is a spreadsheet that the PDPA send me every year about average ages of players, and it's like the average age of the top 8, the top 16, top 32, and the graph just keeps dropping every year. Obviously it's not going to drop by 5 years at a time or whatever, but by a year or so every year, the average age of players in each bracket drops, and that's showing the direction the sport's going in.
The Winmore World Masters has obviously just taken place. First of all, I loved every single second of it. The tournament, it just manifests chaos, that format and everything like that. Initial reactions to the tournament itself?
I think, look, the key thing for us was to work with Winmore, who are a huge strategic partner of ours, to bring that tournament back to life, breathe new life into it. It was a beloved tournament in the 70s, 80s, 90s, then it sort of fell on rockier times in more recent years. And I think a lot of modern darts fans hadn't appreciated what that tournament was about in the context of its format. Obviously we opened the qualifiers and the preliminary rounds up to players from different backgrounds, and it was challenging for too many to enter. I get that, but I think that will evolve over time. But we had a good spread of players in the main draw. And, as you say, the drama was phenomenal. Players being 3 sets behind. Look at the final, going down to that last leg decider. I think the Masters was perhaps lacking in identity beforehand. But, this rebrand now to the Winmore World Masters has really ticked so many boxes. It's
really put the Masters back on the map in a really good way.
In its own right as well. And it's not, it's not a Premier League warm-up tournament or players are back from holiday, so they better have a loosener. It's not that anymore. It's a major event in its own right.
Obviously, I know that you always tweak and whatever the qualifying for it next year. I'm guessing that's something that you'll look at. And me watching it, again, I don't know if this is possible, but it felt too short. I know you had to get ready for the day before, but it still seemed a little bit short that. Some of the groups only
on the Wednesday.
Maybe,
I mean, I'll be honest. We didn't expect it to only take 3.5 hours.
That's what I mean. It seemed a little bit short.
We actually had a call, Graham Fairhurst, Dave, and myself on Wednesday night saying, "Why did that only take 3.5 hours? Are we going to need to look at the format for the weekend?" Now obviously you factor in presentation, ITV's presentation, and ad breaks and things like that. But we were slightly concerned that we may be underrunning over the weekend, and there was a couple of sessions that finished 20, 30 minutes early. But you can live with that; that happens anyway. Yeah. But it was interesting to see the preliminary round matches, be done with so quickly. So that's something we'll look at. I don't think it detracted from it in any way. But in the first year, you would always. We always assess it. We always assess everything, like I said about the European Tour. So, we'll certainly look at that for future years.
One thing, obviously, Dom Taylor is now back playing following his suspension. I want to get your take on the ban, and does it send out the right message? And because it seemed very short compared to other bans, and like you say, with the profile of people watching the sport, youngsters watching it, obviously he's failed a drugs test, which isn't a good thing. But does that send out a strong enough deterrent only 1 month?
Look, I think you have to consider that. I mean, the first thing is this is a question that really should go to the DRA, not to us, because it's them who make these decisions, not us.
I appreciate that, but they don't answer emails because I've asked that question.
Right. Well, those guidelines, those sentencing guidelines, are prescribed upon them in the same way they would be prescribed upon a swimming federation or a table tennis federation or a football association or whatever, And the move towards punishments for recreational drugs being deemed different to performance-enhancing substances. You know, those
No, I
guidelines
appreciate
are in
it's not-
place.
it's
So
not-
it's not right for me to pass a personal opinion on it, but you know, I can see why you're saying what you're saying with it, and I think, you know, ultimately they've got certain restrictions that they have to operate within when it comes to that kind of sentencing.
Well, again, so it was the DRA because I was trying to find out some information on whether it was the DRA that handled the suspension or whether it was the UK anti-doping that handled the suspension.
The guidelines, so UK anti-doping and the doping authorities will work in association with the DRA, but ultimately the decision will come from the DRA, but they will have input from from relevant authorities.
Looking ahead to the new season, the way this one has really cranked up, you must be excited for what's potentially on the horizon at the moment. The way darts is going, this trajectory.
Yeah, I am. I mean, it's great to see that, put the sold out signs up and to get new TV deals done and all things like that. But ultimately, that's only good if we can make it count for the benefit of the sport. You know, where can we go that's new? What can we do that's different? What can we do that's better to keep improving the sport? You know, we want to really ramp up the prize money. We want to bring the game to new territories. We want to, give players the opportunity to be genuine professionals if they're not in the top 32 or top 50, So these are things that we'll work on, but we can only get these things in place when the top end's right, because it's the top end that funds everything else. You know, I listened to some comments about, what TV money what should be done with TV money and things like that. And
that was my interview, so I know what you're talking about.
But, TV money is there for two reasons, for two benefits. One is to underpin the future of the sport, and number two, to put money into players' pockets.
Yeah.
So we'll take care of underpinning the future of the sport, and we'll provide money for players' pockets as well. And you will see prize money increases at the top end. Of course you will. You couldn't imagine a scenario where that wasn't true. But we're very conscious of the need to make sure that players lower down the rankings have a fair opportunity to make a living out of it as well.
Well, just on that, obviously I know you like a spreadsheet. Where do you think at the moment the line is on those rankings of those who can earn enough money out of the sport to be full-time?
Well, I think it's very difficult to judge that, because you might have some players, who have to get on an aeroplane for 2 hours every week, and you might have some players who have to get in the car for half an hour every week.
Yeah.
So I think it's difficult to say that. Or some players who've got a sponsor, some players who are paying it out their own pocket, or working a second job. I think it's difficult. But broadly, we would consider, and this is following some research we did with the PDPA a few years ago that we will do again this year. Broadly, we would consider somewhere between 64 and 80 of the 128 tour card holders as being full-time professional dart players. That figure might be a little bit out of date, either way. I don't think it's less than 64. I'd be surprised if it was more than 80. But in the same vein, then you've got players who aren't tour card holders who are professional dart players.
Yeah.
Players who play Challenge Tour, Super Series, ADC, maybe something in their own country if they're not from the UK. So there's all different ways of judging it, and people have different levels of ambition. Some people might be happy to earn 20 grand a year and they can get by, and others need to earn 75. So it's very different to put a one-size-fits-all answer on that.
Well, Connor Scott's a prime example of that. Last year he didn't have a card, played in everything, and I think he earned about 80 grand or something for the year by playing in everything. So I understand your point there that it is hard to physically put a number on it. Q School made changes this year, so you had to play in every day of the final stage. Was that a success, do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, that was just basically, we felt it was unfair. It was almost denying somebody from the first stage a chance if you got through to the final stage and then just played once and then disappeared, I don't really think that had a massive bearing on anybody, and we were happy to consider medical exemptions or anything like that if there was a reason why somebody couldn't do something. So I don't think that had a big impact on the outcome of anything.
This is me putting a one forward here for Q School. On that final, the second stage, could you do a top-up list? I.e., when someone gets their card, a bit like the Pro Tour where someone else comes in, so there are points available for every game, because your leg difference was affected by that one if you lost in the 128, but the points weren't. And I'm sure pretty much that
If
someone would
if
take
we
that
did that and
gamble.
they called it the Phil Bars rule, would it be the crowning glory of your career in darts?
No, because the famous Mr. Phil Bars on TV is never going to get beaten. No, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That top up list, so it gets.
Yeah, I'll stick it on the list for the conversation with the PDPA.
No, it was just something
It's
that
not a bad shout.
that we spoke about. Could there be a top up
Yeah,
list?
I mean, obviously, then you're relying on somebody maybe hanging around for 3 days or travelling there and back. But you know, if the rewards are there, people will do
Someone's
it.
always going to take, even if you went down 70 places, someone
will always do
someone
it.
have that one shot.
I think
of
we
glory.
did that last year on the Players' Championship. We had an event which had particularly low entries for some reason.
I remember, yeah.
And someone had to go out. I won't name him because I won't want to embarrass them. But somebody was there and they had to go out and buy a pair of trousers so they could play. They were so low down the top up list they didn't expect the call.
Yeah, no, I remember it. It was an interesting one.
Yeah.
But then going to moving forward, the changes to the UK Open qualifiers as well have gone more in-house. How has that gone? Because looking at it across the spectrum, it's been a bit up and down. Like some of the other events haven't been particularly well attended and so on.
Yeah, but we work closely with those clubs, and they were happy with it for a first go, and I think we'll see them again next year. And we want to have more of those. We launched PDC in the community, as you know, up in Tamworth in November, and we want more of those sort of facilities to get involved with us. So we'll talk to places about their facilities. It's the whole idea of PDC in the community to upgrade the facilities in darts clubs. So we want to see the UK Open qualifiers out on the road. Look, we'd been with Riley's for a long time. We felt the relationship needed to go in a slightly different direction. We're more than capable of staging the qualifiers ourselves, and the entry numbers for those were tremendous. So we'll keep evolving that. But there's no reason why that can't continue to grow.
Of the days of the true amateur in the UK Open gone, and I'm not talking this year. I'm talking
I think they probably have.
In general. That Barry the bin man from Preston.
Yeah, I think
are those days of the UK Open gone?
Because the semi-pro player has now got enough opportunities to not be an amateur.
Yeah.
The amateur player is too far behind the standard of the semi-pro player. I think Paul Hogan, was the professional amateur. Rob Cross was probably, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, probably the last sort of standout player to come through.
Him and Barry Lynn the same year of the real.
But no, I think you're right. I think in the early days of the UK Open, it was finding the real star from a local pub somewhere who went on to have their weekend in the sun in Bolton. But it doesn't kind of work like that anymore. It's more just opportunities for non-tour card holders.
Yeah, no, it was just an interesting one to see. And obviously, I know this is an ITV tournament. Are we going to see a progression of the UK Open to get more players in, or is it impossible to go past the number that we're already at?
It's impossible to get more in if we just keep it over 3 days.
Right.
Yeah. So whether we look at the Thursday night, which then clashes with the Premier League, there's all sorts of challenges.
It used to be a Thursday night, didn't it? It was Thursday night before.
In Bolton?
Yeah,
but it was in June and it was on Sky.
Yeah, I understand it. That is more, but I remember the Thursday night.
I'm not sure if there was necessarily every afternoon. Maybe there was there Friday afternoon? Anyway.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's more about the number of players than the number of sessions, really.
Yeah.
But in terms of, look, the event's great at Butlins. Everybody loves it there in the same way the Players' Championship finals work so well there. So, no intention to look at doing anything with the venue. But it's, how we can, if it's appropriate, get more players in.
Well, on this comes back to the women's game as well, and you talk about opportunities everywhere else, and the women's series has now been going since 2020. Well,
that'll be COVID,
announced it, and then could we see them getting opportunities in the UK Open? And another one that's come up is the evolution of the women's game. Could we see like a Players' Championship finals for the women at Minehead as well, whether that be the top 16 or something, playing Reds or something like that?
We've obviously got the women's World Match Play, which coming off a 12-month rolling order of merit will give female players the opportunity throughout the year to qualify for. And I've always said we want to funnel the top women players into the main draw because that's part of the appeal of it. But in the same vein, that won't stop us necessarily putting on more opportunities for women players. We need to see where the top end of that game is going, because obviously it's dominated by a small number of players. So let's see if we can get more more players from the top sort of 12, 16 of the women's order of merit Women's Series Order of Merit, you know, competing regularly against, you know, the likes of Bo and Fallon and you know, Lisa and whatever.
Well, I know you're busy time for you, but the WDF event, that was a much younger field to it this year. So at least there are women and young girls filtering through, which should be a good thing.
You know, if you speak to the JDC about the number of, you know, you speak to the JDC about the number of you know, girls they've got playing in their tournaments, you know, and we've agreed something with them last week that will be great for the girls in the JDC system, which I won't tell you about because it's not my announcement to make. It's up to them. But
is that the JPL?
No.
I was saying because they've already announced that. That was
no, it's not that. No, we've agreed something else with them.
That'll
be great
cool.
for girls playing in their system. So I'm sure they'll announce that soon.
Yeah, well, obviously on Bo as well, that we all seen what she's done in the women's game. Narrowly missed out at Q School, but going and done what she's done on the Challenge Tour. Must, like you say, filtering those top women into the men's game. You must be delighted to see that.
Yeah, you would hope that you know, other women players can get confidence from what Bo's achieving at the moment. You know, and I'm sure when she feels the time's right, you know, she will take her career onto the next step as well. You know, so yeah, let's see what she does.
Well, she's in line for a Pro Tour call up this week, so that'll be a good measuring stick to see where her game is. But before I let you go, moving into the rest of the year, what have we got on the horizon? Is there any significant changes coming up?
No, we'll look to announce, you know, increased prize money. Don't forget that the new Sky deal is from 2026.
Of course.
You know, so when people talk about the extra money coming into the game, it's still 12 months away. So we'll make some changes to prize money this year. As you say, we've put in extra £500,000 into Players' Championship events by staging 4 extra events. You know, we have got the extra prize money that's gone into the Winmore World Masters. You know, and we're looking at other things, you know. We haven't announced the Grand Slam format yet, which is going to keep everybody guessing, which will be a lot of fun when we get that out. But yeah, look, we'll just continue doing what we're doing, and you know, we appreciate that it's difficult to please everybody, and maybe sometimes, you know, people have justification for feeling that they've been hard done by, or that, you know, not everything's gone their way. But we try and do everything as fairly as we can and as open and honestly as we can. And we'll just keep trying to push the sport forward. Just
on that, obviously, I know you're not going to tell me, but the Grand Slam will look different this year.
It will.
That's exciting to. You can't let it slip. I was like saying.
Yeah, but I mean, look different is so vague that I can say anything. I might change the colour of the lights.
No, but will the format change from what it was?
There will be very, very noticeable changes. Yes. Yeah.
Interesting. I like that. That's very intriguing. Was that obviously when you touched on what the Masters had maybe not had an identity? Is this the same with the Grand Slam?
No, not at all. No. We're just looking at opportunities and making sure everything's fair across the system.
Matt, absolute pleasure.
Thanks.
Catching up with you here in Belfast, mate. Thank you very much.